Hello and welcome to another episode of the TF Cast.
Today with us, we have artist and illustrator Justin Bergo. We came across your work from, there was a bunch of publicity about you being selected to be the Surly Furious art design.
Yeah, so
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how that came to be.
I'm Justin Bergo. I'm a local illustrator that I work freelance, and I'm commission based right now. I think this darkness thing is gonna set my portfolio in a good place where I can really send it off and hopefully get some gigs where I can draw, the stuff I like to draw. I like to draw monsters and demons and dragons and stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I work out of Mankato, Minnesota. I have not recently, for like 2 years now, to sustain my art habit, I've kind of been making picture frames also locally. And a lot of people, as you guys know, there's a lot of art collectors and artists based around here. So there's a lot of posters and prints and paintings that need framing. So I've kind of picked up that skill set. And yeah, but I'm an artist. I've been drawing, creating all sorts of stuff since I was a little kid, but I started to take it very seriously when I moved back to Mankato. And I think when I was 26, started to go into MSU, got my degree from there and kind of took it from there. And I create illustrations, and hopefully you guys will see them and like them in the future. And hopefully you'll drink some of the darkness beer that has my crazy design on it. I want to say what it is, but I can't, right?
So you're not allowed to tell us what the design looks like?
Not yet. Well, to be honest, they have to totally approve it, but we're pretty far along the process where they'll see it. You guys will see it and you'll dig it, I think.
Is it it's totally completed then?
It's getting close. It's getting close to the there's a few more tweaks I've got to do and send back in, get it approved, and then move on to the designing of the letters, which I don't love. I'm not the best at it, but I think I'll make something cool.
So what was the process for, was it an application that you submitted, or did they just select you randomly from a hat, or how did that go?
So it's it's an open call to artists that they do every year. They have been doing it for, I think 4 or 5 years now. Before that, from what I've read, it was Omar, who's the CEO, the owner of Surly. It was mostly art friends coming up to it at a party and being like, dude, I want to draw your darkness bottle this year. And then he'd be like, yeah, let's do it. That's awesome. That's what I've read. I don't really have the inside scoop on that. But yeah, so I submitted last year, and I'm not 100% sure, but from inside sources that I've heard, it didn't get submitted properly and the files didn't get submitted, and they saw it after the deadline. And so this year, everyone was I had a lot of people make sure they were double checking to make sure I submitted this year. They're like, make sure you get it in, make sure, and I was like, I'm going to do it, don't worry about it. And so it's been about a month now, I think. I got an email from Michael Berglund, who's their creative director at Surly, and asked me if I wanted to do it. And I was like, if it would have been a phone call, I would have been almost positive somebody was fucking with me. I would have been like, what are you doing? Leave me alone. No, but it was a great piece of news that I was very excited to do it. My brother, I told this story earlier, so this might be redundant for people, but I remember my brother picking me up from the airport when I had just gotten back from Seattle, a trip out there while I was going to school up at MSU. And he's like, dude, they have a keg of this darkness beer at the Blue Door pub. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I just want to go home and sleep. And he's like, no, we're going to go. We're going to get a burger. We're going to have some of this beer. And we went and sat down and ordered it. And I tasted it. I was like, oh, that's great. And he's like, you got to see the bottle. And he showed it to me. And I was just blown away. I was like, oh, dude, I'm in. I want to do art for this in the future. And here we are, 9-10 years later. So Yeah, it's been a pretty great experience, and I'm very excited to, have my shit seen by the most people that will have ever seen my art, which is awesome.
Now, looking into some of your artwork to do this, I'm seeing a lot of like familiar characters, like some stuff that maybe came out of the D&D handbook, or
Absolutely.
just stuff like that. Is that the places that you're doing freelance art for?
Yeah, so I've done there's like the big 2 or big 3 companies that exist out there, like Wizards of the Coast. They own like the Magic the Gathering brand. They also own D&D and some other properties. That's like the big one I want to work for. I've always wanted to work for that company. When I was young, my uncle is actually like my second cousin, but I've always called him my uncle. He wrote for the company that published D&D TSR. And so he would have this game room, and he used to do these like reviews for games, and I would go and visit him and over the summer, and I would just sit in this air-conditioned small room that was just lined with games. And I was just like blown away by it. I was like, oh, this is the best, little fat nerd that I was and still am. So I would sit and like read these things. And then my mom would, like, end of the 2 weeks I would go and visit, my mom would come and pick me up. And I remember, at that age when you don't want to leave somewhere, you throw a fit, and I would throw a fit. And I remember him just being like trying to placate me. I think he had it planned all the time. Like, he gave me these 3 binders of the D&D second edition, AD&D second edition monster manual with these trifold, beautiful painted covers by Jeff Easley. Like, inside there are these black and white little images on these monster manual blocks. And I was like, oh. And I shut up, got in the car, and just read. I had no idea what the rule sets were, right? Like, but it had like the biography. It had like what they ate, and they had all these different monsters. And it was like reading, made up, dinosaur. And before that, I was into like dinosaurs and all that awesome stuff. So this was just like made up things like that had this game attached that I didn't know the rules to, and I would just sit and fascinated with that. So I remember that summer, a friend of mine, Andy Leipold, and we sat down and made up a game to use these creatures. And it was us just like we're like, this one looks cooler. We were using our imagination to play basically like imaginary G.I. Joe monsters, and then we'd attack each other. It was awesome. It was like, I remember that like summer so fondly, just being like, we don't know this. And then I remember that Christmas, my uncle Rick Swan, he gave me the like player's handbook. He's like, this might help you, because he'd heard that I was making up rules to this game, and I was like, oh, thank you. So yeah, that was kind of it. That was the start. And then my brother who's 5 years older than me, he was always into art, always into music, always into art. And you always want to be your brother, right? So like I would see his drawings, and then he went to Gen Con one year, and he brought back all this crazy stuff. He'd bought like all these dollar games, and he brought back the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, like 4 books that like the Laird Eastman books that took over my life for like 2 years. I just read those constantly to where the covers were falling off and stuff. And that's it. I wanted to draw monsters and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and here I am many years later drawing the exact same shit.
That's cool. One of the other things I saw from your work was a series of I don't even know exactly how to describe them. It looked maybe they were all like black and white, very smoky looking, like dark and difficult to pull shapes out of. The
Old Gods series.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was one of the ones you submitted to us. Did you display that at the 410 project? Or is it a different gallery?
So, those are those are my charcoal based things. Those are. So when I was up at MSU, I started there in the design program, and it was great. Matt was a great teacher up there, and he was my advisor. And I got like 2 or 3 years into that because I really wanted to learn Photoshop, right? And I didn't have any idea how to use those programs at all. And I thought that'd be a good way to learn it. And it was a good introductory thing, but then I had it at my house and I was working on it consistently at home, where following that path kind of just didn't make sense. So I had my portfolio review and Matt came up to me and he's just like, hey, you're an illustrator, you're a drawer, you're not a designer. Like, I don't think you should move forward with this. And it was kind of a blow for me. I wanted to like graduate, like on time. And I was like kind of upset at first, but it was the best educational advice I ever got. I switched my focus over to drawing. And through that, I was able to like broaden some of my ideas, and I started playing around with this consistency of charcoal and water and how they would resist each other. And when they dried, you get these crazy forms. And then if I could shape those, because I have this, my aesthetic is like destruction and kind of like broken down runes, basically. I love that stuff. I was like, I really wanted to like play with that idea. And it's fun to like adapt those shapes with this wet format and see where it dries and see how it lands, because like what you've got when you're creating these is a very cool structural thing. Let it dry, comes back, and maybe what was interesting before isn't interesting anymore, but maybe something over here is interesting. So I spent a year or two kind of developing this idea of how to get this charcoal to really stick to the canvas, which isn't canvas, it's just primed board. But it's been a lot of fun to like figure out that.
Primed board, is that like a type of paper, or is this like a slab of wood?
Yeah, it's just a slab of wood. Like I was using 1/4 inch, I was using like 1/4 inch veneer board, which you don't need. You can just do like MDF board, which I ended up using. The biggest thing you've got to worry about is like that you discover as a working artist is warping. You've got big planks of wood. One of the things I have learned since getting into woodworking is like, it's awesome as an artist to have more of the trade side of it, the process side of it, and to marry those two together is an important lesson to be learned. And I've talked to a lot of graduates from MSU and other art programs that are like, I wish there was more trades, like more of the trade skill set built into that program. I'm not shitting on the program at all. It's a good program, but I really, if I had one piece of advice to give any faculty, I'd be like, work that in. I think I stretched 2 frames when I was up there. And other than that, it's just like, that's it. That's the only process side of prepping art that I learned up there. But
yeah, and you said now you're making picture frames as well.
Yep.
We talk to a lot of artists here, or just in general, who, when they talk about how they make money, it's pretty diverse. Like typically It's not just one thing. So I think that's a really valid point, what you were saying about bringing that craft side in. But with the frames, you're doing that at the makerspace, or
Yep.
How did you come into that kind of?
So I was aware of some of the people on the board that got that up and running. Rick Esser, primarily Rick Esser, but I also went to school with a few of the board members. And I remember getting introduced to it. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, they had an open house in like early May 2017, I think. And a friend of mine was like, hey, have you heard of this place? And I hadn't. And we went down there, and it was this open shop thing. I don't know if you're very familiar with it, but it's multidiscipline. We have a wood shop, we have screen printing, we have metal shop, we have ceramics, we have all those like great things. I'm saying we now because I'm deeply invested and involved in it. But yeah, back then it had just opened up, and they had this one tool I was really fascinated with. It's called the Glowforge, and it's this laser etcher. Basically, it's a user-friendly laser etching machine. And they were running just a demo of it, and I was like, fuck, that's sick. And I immediately had like 5 ideas, and those ideas were those old gods, which are H.P. Lovecraft. I don't know if you guys are Lovecraftian fans, but H.P. Lovecraft has this mythos that he created in his time writing, and they involve these like gods that like are so massive and scary. You go insane even thinking about them. And I've loved that idea and that concept for so long that I went home that night and I drew my first one. And then I was like, yeah, I'm going to go for it. This is going to be awesome. And then I got a membership down there and just started going down there, and everyone was so accepting and cool. I haven't really looked back. And I was sitting around one day, and Rick and Joe were there, and they were sitting and talking to one another. And I was like, I've always wanted to make a picture frame, just like in the future. I was like, yeah. And Rick's like, come on, let's go do it. And I was like, no, I meant like in the future. He's like, no, what are you talking about? You have all the tools here. You have somebody that can teach you what's stopping you.
Yeah.
And so we got up, and he helped me make my first picture frame, like did all the miter cuts and did the joinery and all that stuff. And I was just like, oh, it was dirty as hell and didn't like look great, but like I was like, oh, I get it. I know how to do this. And so I had been making these old god prints on the Glowforge. So I had 3 different images, an edition of 30 for each. So I had 90 pieces of art. And I was like, I'm going to frame a couple of these. So I built like 10 frames for each of them. So 30 frames. And I was like, I'm going to frame all of these. And I ended up making like 90 frames over the course of like a month and a half. And it was a great introduction into making simple frames. And after that, I reached out to some friends and like, hey, do you need frames made? I kind of need practice, pay for materials, and I'll make frames for you. So I did that for a few people. And then local artist Megan Hoogland, who owns Mecha Tattoo, she was great. She was just like, I love working with her. She's just like, hey, I need frames. And I was like, okay. I've been doing like, pay for materials and this is after I'd made a few and like kind of figured out how to do it all. She's like, no, you should charge for them. And I was like, oh, well, I don't want to blah, blah, blah. I had like imposter syndrome. I'm like, I'm not very good yet. And she's like, should start charging for them. And so she like made me pay her, or she made herself pay me. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then I've just gotten increasingly better at it. And it really does feed that artistic side of me too, that detail oriented, like creative side. There's a lot of times I'll get home from like 8 hours, 10 hours of work down there, and I'll be like, yeah, my creative energy is spent. Like it's spent. Like I'll sit down and be like, I'll draw a little bit and be like, no, there's none. So I know it's tapping the same resources that my creative energy comes from. And it's been kind of a balance to try and figure out like the craft side of me and putting that energy into, frames, which make me a lot of money or good money. And I'm happy doing them. And then getting home and like still wanting to draw the monsters and pursue that passion that I really want to do, which is make beasts and creatures for gaming companies. So yeah, the makerspace, absolutely everybody check it out. It's the best spot in Mankato. It's a game changer for me for sure. And I think it would be for a lot of up and coming artists, people that have maybe like a garage workspace. It's awesome.
Yeah. It's really cool. It does expand. You walk in there and you see all the tools. And even if you don't know how to use them all, you're like, oh,
yeah.
Wow.
And
like I could do some stuff here.
Absolutely. And you got like a lot of artists that are working, like Joe Herkey, he's Joe. I should probably say their last names when I'm referring to these people. I'm like talking to you guys like, it's Joe Herkey. He's down there and he is a fantastic ceramicist, and also, he is also a fantastic woodworker. He's the one who helped me a lot. And I worked out at Phil's and Custom Hardwoods with him for about 4 or 5 months. And he's out on his own now, doing his own thing. You guys also should, if you want woodwork done, I couldn't recommend a better person to work for you. And then there's like Dustin Swears, who's also ceramicist. He does a bunch of like glass blowing and metal working down there. Just it's artist mentality. Like you collaborate, you ask opinion. You're able to get critique like on demand, which is like not on demand. You don't want to push it, but like you can go to people that have, they know how to verbalize their opinions very well and like help you out. And I like that. It's very studio based. Good
collaborative energy, maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a good space to like bounce ideas off of, grow from those ideas based on, it's that feedback's not always positive. It's not always what you want to hear. Like I presented something to Dustin, and I have very different aesthetics, but I appreciate and I really enjoy his feedback because he's honest. And you don't get that from a lot of people. A lot of people are like, this is awesome. This is rad. Like sometimes you're like, oh, thank you. That makes me feel great. But then it doesn't help you improve on that image or maybe your progress as much as it should. So I would say, talking about the makerspace, it's like I said, a game changer.
Yeah, it's a really wonderful resource that we have that here.
Absolutely.
In this area.
Yeah, it's great. Come down, take a tour. I think it sells itself. Like it truly does. People just need to put eyes on it and see what's available here in Mankato. Like we are very lucky to have that space.
You said you've gotten progressively more involved with that. Do you just mean you do more work there, or have you taken on some additional roles?
Yeah, so I was working pretty steadily down there, like 40, 50 hours a week, just on my own stuff, not working, not anything like that. And the board approached me to see if I wanted to take on a little bit more responsibility down there. And they were starting to get a volunteer subcommittee together. So I said I'd head that up, and I am the head of the volunteer subcommittee now. And that means, I just kind of manage the volunteers, what the board expects of us, and try to get as many people in there to volunteer. Also, we're looking for volunteers. So if you guys, anybody out there listening,
what sort of things would a volunteer do?
The volunteer system, it's basically whatever the board needs of us. Right now we're trying to get back up to our full hours with the pandemic. We had a shutdown period, and we also opened up with less staff than we had, which is the staff is basically the board and some volunteers. But it was the board for many, excuse me. It was the board for like 2 years of them just like grinding it out, doing like 12-hour shifts and stuff. So
is a volunteer like a studio tech then, who kind of watches the space,
helps out whenever we have an event coming up. We we'll do some of the flyer passing out. The volunteer is really like a catch-all for all the basic needs of the place that they maybe can't handle, or they can handle, but like
needs
they can pass it off to us. It shifts from each meeting, and we have our volunteer meetings like once a month. The commitment isn't huge, but it is, if you love that space and love the idea of that space, it's rewarding. It's very rewarding. I can say that.
That's cool. We were just talking about the makerspace before we knew you worked there often, so that's super cool.
No, it's great
to make that connection.
Yeah, I love it, and I love everybody involved with it. They all work so hard. It's true. They work very hard to make that place as great as it is.
Well, you want to go back around to the beasts again?
Yeah, let's get back into some monsters and creatures.
All right, okay. I want to know from like the D&D canon, like what your favorite is, and piggybacking off that, if you had to create your own like completely independent beast,
okay.
Where would you be going? Like,
all right, man. Okay, this is deep. This is a great question. Okay, my favorite beast of all time, creature of all time, is a minotaur. But that's not specifically D&D centric. That's Greek mythos and stuff like that. But hands down, minotaurs are the coolest thing ever. Like Warhammer minotaurs from like the 90s are in my head the most bestial, fiery, scary creatures out there, and they don't get lost and they hunt you in a maze. So fuck. All right. I would say of the controlled IPs of D&D, man, that's tough. There's the Mind Flayer, the Beholder. No one's gonna know what I'm talking about. So
We'll have a couple people who will be like,
I'm with you so far.
yeah, okay.
I've been playing Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, nice.
already,
Yeah.
So I'm on the pre side of that. So
Heck yes. I said heck there. I've been swearing like a crazy person. I decided to say heck. Yeah. So the Beholder is this crazy aberrant creature. It's got this giant eyeball and then these eye stalks and then this crazy mouth, slimy mouth that has this like teeth that go on for weeks. So I think as a creature and the insanity that thing is, that would have to be my favorite. And I'm not alone in that. Everybody loves a good Beholder that like is into D&D. And it's got all these crazy powers that can like turn you to stone with one eye stalk, disintegrate you with another. It's just like, it's so fun. And they're like intelligent and scary. And that's the intelligence of these scary monsters is what really gets me. It's just this, you don't want something that hunts you that's smarter than you and that can kill you with eyeballs. So yeah, I would say Beholder. Yeah.
Beholder.
Yeah. And I've been doing, to get back into that, I've been doing these white on black images of the D&D monsters, like A to Z. That's the project I'm calling it. One of the best titles I've ever come up with is Monsters A to Z.
Like a children's book.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm drawing all these like crazy, like mouth, like I drew a Beholder for one of it, and I have a friend that works out at Wizards of the Coast, and he's like, dude, you shouldn't make those things because I'll have to stop you from actually producing them and selling them. I was like, I'm drawing a Beholder. I don't care.
Wait a minute. If you create a creature that is so closely like, do they
Right.
have intellectual property rights?
They
on
do.
a certain number of eyes. I mean, because like,
Yeah, right.
a Beholder
That's a
is
good
like
question.
kind of, it's like a little bit of a Medusa riff with
Yeah,
some, you know what I mean? Like,
no, right.
like what? How does that work?
That's there's a grand history. We're just going into like D&D podcast. There's kind of a grand history of, the D&D property stealing a lot of like Tolkien ideas. And then as D&D became an actual thing and not just like based out of, the basements of the guys who created it, like Gygax and Arnst, is that his name? Anyways, they had to like change a lot of stuff. They had to change hobbits into halflings, and they had to change like what from like orcai into orcs, and like change all these ideas around. And it's very interesting to say that. And yeah, D&D has IPs. It has intellectual property, and if you get too close to it, they can be like, hey, stop making this stuff,
Because people write D&D books. Like
Yep.
they write books that are based off of the rule sets and all of that. Like that's great world building. Like if you have a story and then you just kind of like, I forget the author, but he wrote a book about Vietnam and then it didn't work out. And then he just changed the setting, and it was Vietnam in space.
Forever
And then
War.
Yeah, that's probably the one.
That's it. I love that book.
And then that one just popped off for him. Like,
Yep. And it went crazy.
yeah. But that's just like so odd. Like, do they make money off of a book based in the?
So yeah, I think a lot of people, if there's a lot of Kickstarter is a huge thing for exactly that type. There will be people that have this idea for a campaign setting, and I don't know much about licensing, but it does involve that. I think they approach D&D because 5th edition isn't open source. 4th edition was open source. You could just take that rule set and use it for stuff. So 5th edition, I think you have to go to them and get the licensing idea to be like, hey, I want to create this campaign setting. Some people don't use any of the rules though. They just come up with like the narrative world. And they're like, hey, you could, if they don't want to like get the licensing, they're like, hey, you could, use these creatures in this world that is based around the D&D setting. I don't know. Some people try to subvert it or whatever, but yeah, there is a lot of that. And then there's obviously the licensed brands like Kobold Press and stuff that have the licensing from Wizards of the Coast.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I never even thought about like, where I've seen, different kinds of creatures coming from, because it spans video games, books, card games, or whatever. We're in preparing for this episode today too. We were talking about like just how much art those things make. There's a new edition of like Magic the Gathering cards that come out. You can probably, I don't know how often they come out. I haven't played since I was in high school, but like, that's a ton of art.
Ton of art. It's great. It's breeding a lot of artists, and it's breeding a lot of jobs for those artists. And Wizards of the Coast so I've had some dealings with Fantasy Flight, which is based out of Minnesota. It's based out of Roseville.
What do they do?
They're very similar to D&D. They do like board games and stuff like that. They have some properties that they do the Star Wars Legion game and Star Wars. They have like Star Wars properties. They have some Warhammer. They don't have Warhammer anymore, but they have other properties that they make, like the Song of Ice and Fire board games and stuff like that from George R. R. Martin's. You guys know the Game of Thrones stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember talking to their art director, and he said that he finalizes, because they have so many products and a lot of like card-based games. He finalizes art on 56 products a day or something like that.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's incredible, and like that's relatively small compared to D&D. It might be 56 a week.
How do they source that art? Like, is it a call or?
And so, from what I've gathered from art directors and art coordinators, it's basically a lot of people at that level. A lot of people are sending in their portfolio, right? Because that's the best pay scale and also the best prestige for future work and all that. And so they pick people that are reliable, that are good, and that are easy to work with. They put them in a pool, and they just keep tapping that pool. And you'll see that in like Magic the Gathering. They keep going back to the same artists, and those artists understand a few things. I know D&D wants to have a cohesive look to Magic the Gathering. They want to have a cohesive look to D&D. They want to have a cohesive look to all of their products, right? And so when artists are able to make that look, or make their art fit that look, and still have a little bit of the technique that the artist brings, obviously you're not ever going to lose your style completely. Those are the ones they keep reaching out for. I mean, this is all just knowledge I've gained and compacted and reduced into this conversation, but it's something they definitely are looking for, and they keep tapping that pool. That's why a lot of people, artist friends and artists that I follow on social media, once they get that first Magic card and it's well done, they're in the pool. It's kind of a huge breakthrough for them. They're like, I'm in the pool. They'll keep coming back to me, hopefully, and it's a great way to start your career. And once you're in those top 3, like I said, you're kind of like, you can go other places. You can get book covers. You can start doing, more of these Kickstarters. You can do anything. Once you have a name behind you, you start to get sought out. Mm-hmm. And me as not only an artist, but me as a fan, I follow artists all over the place. I'll be like, oh, dude, did you see, so-and-so is doing this now? Like, it's going to be awesome, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
At least they're not doing it on Fiverr.
Oh, yeah. That became like a crazy weird thing where like YouTube is now just like, YouTube's like, hey, I'm paying this Fiverr guy to play the bass for me. And then they just like watched videos of people playing the bass. And then that got popular, and now it's just like all over. I was like, I remember doing Fivers because I did a podcast with a friend of mine a while ago, and we would have like Fiverr do the stupid rants or like make songs out of these stupid ideas we'd come up with, and they were great, but they were like, it was this weird like internet subculture thing that my friend was really into. He's like, I'm gonna have a Fiverr of that. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? But they always turned out awesome. So
you've done some work on Fiverr. Willis does like animations on there or something.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. So I'll answer any questions you have or anything that gets brought up. But like I just take a very specific part of like a process. Like in this example, I use like a Blender template and I upload someone's graphic and then I re-render the animation with their graphics. So it's like something I can do very simply on the back end of like a much larger project.
Gotcha. So is it taking like 2D images and rigging it a little bit?
Yep. So I have like 3D environment and then a 2D plane, and I just swap their image out and add it, and I tune it a little bit.
Do some parallaxing and stuff like that.
Yep. And then I render it out, and they've paid me to take their 2D image and turn it into, it's still a 2D video, but it's like a glitched animation. So.
Nice. I should talk to you. I should talk to you about some very basic animation stuff, parallaxing and stuff. Because I've always been like, I want to learn how to do that, but I more just want to pay somebody to do it. That's cool though.
We can chat after the podcast.
Sounds good.
Fiverr is an interesting space like that, where I think one of the problems that I have often on there is that someone has a really vague request, and to like figure out what they're asking for is like a nightmare. So I just say no to anything that's super vague.
Yeah, welcome to client work.
That's true. Well, and on Fiverr too, it's like it's low information and you don't know those people. Like
right.
When you've got their contact and you're like meeting them face to face, it's much easier to be like, all right, what are we making?
Absolutely.
How are we getting down to this? So
absolutely.
It's interesting to hear your having them do rants and stuff.
Oh, it was so, that's more Gordy, who's the guy I did the podcast with. He was just like, dude, we talked about Hawkman and tuna melts. Let's turn it into a song. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? Okay. And he came back and like, there's like a 5-minute song that this guy did for me, and it was awesome. I was like, okay.
Well,
you're right.
What's cool though too is that's someone might have specialized in that. So like you have this idea where you're like, I want to turn these words into a song, and then you've got some person who's spent a lot of time getting to the point where they can like take those words and make a song.
Oh yeah,
in a way that would take like anyone who's not used to that, like it'd cost hundreds of dollars, it'd be like many hours, but they've got their system to a point where it can work.
Yeah.
And so that's the like beauty of Fiverr in particular, is it lets either a creator make some money for a process they've developed, or it lets someone else kind of like get the benefits of their process without having to do it all themselves.
It's pretty affordable. It is pretty great, and I wasn't shitting on Fiverr at all. I was shitting on the YouTube people that were like, "Hey, let's
culture
see."
Around it.
Yeah, it's relatively new too. Like in the last year, 6 months or something, that those started popping up on my YouTube algorithm.
If they're getting paid to do something silly, like, I mean, if you think about it, if you just wanted to make like a Hawkman tuna, I don't know what you're talking about.
Me neither.
Yeah, like, if that's just what you want to do as an artist, there's a good chance that you might not ever get paid for it. But,
right.
like, there was an initial transaction there that supported the arts.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Oh,
like,
I love it too. It's it's like gig based stuff. You throw it out there, and you find somebody that can take your idea. And what's also great about it too, and this goes along with your point, it's those people have a very set thing, so you kind of know what you're getting, but the product invested with your initial idea that you get back is like this golden, beautiful thing. And I think we did all in all like 10 things, and I would say like 6 of them hit really great, and then the 4 other ones were just like, we spent $40-$50 on stuff we're never gonna watch again, but the 6 we've got, we'll just sit and giggle about for like hours on end, put in a podcast here and there. It's great. It's a cool system, and I really think it'll keep expanding into something more. And I think people have found careers out of that, you know. Or I know people have.
Yeah.
Where they've become super popular and then gone on to like do actual work. Not actual work.
All right.
Totally demeaned. Totally. I had all this goodwill built up, and then I'm like, then they went on and did actual work. I'm my dad. Get a real job. Go cut some woods. Yeah. No, I know.
Fire to build somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Please edit all that garbage.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a cool space. I really like. I like all creative endeavors that like can pay the artists and also help them make that transition from like amateur into semi legitimate pro into, you know, helping. There's so many people, myself included, that just like, what's the next step? I have no idea what the next step is. I spent many years in limbo just being like, somebody will discover me. They'll find my sketchbook somewhere. And they're like, no.
Yeah.
No, they won't. I'm like all through my 20s, which was just like, I was like, I'm an artist. Yeah, I'm an artist for sure. And I'd have friends being like, okay, what are you doing with it? And this is like pre-social media. I was just like, I'm building my portfolio. You know, I'm getting there. I'm building my portfolio. And it's just like, no, you have to be really kind of aggressive, and I'm very bad at it, but you have to really put yourself out there, and you have to talk about yourself, and you have to like do the social media game and stuff. And some of the social media stuff most of it's gross and disgusting, but some of it's like good. You get a lot of like good feedback. You get true people. You get people that really like your work. And there's days where it's like the worst thing I could think of doing, and there's other days where I'm like, oh, this is cool. I got some feedback from some cool people that are into my stuff, and it kind of drives you to keep creating. Yeah, but that transition period, the Fiverr is a great example of like what you can do. YouTube now, you'll get lost in the algorithm, but like all these pop-up things that are like allowing artists to directly connect to audiences it's good. I think. I don't know if it's great, but I think it's the idea of it's good. I don't know if all of it, with all of the static energy out there, is good for the culture, but I think all in all, it's good.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise. All right, I got one more. Is the podcast still going on? You're talking about a podcast?
No, we haven't done it. We haven't done it for a while, but we want to start doing it.
Well, if you want to plug it, you can send anyone who's still hanging on.
Okay, it was called Gordy Tells Justin Comics, and it was just my friend Gordy, who's the greatest. I hadn't read a comic for like years, and I used to really be into comic books, and so I would just ask him. I'd be like, dude, let's just sit and you just tell me about Hawkman. And he would just sit and tell me about Hawkman. And we were having this conversation once, and this is the tuna melt thing, and he had got this disgusting sandwich at Subway. He got like tuna and pepperoni and like mayonnaise, and I hate it.
Yeah, that's messed up.
Right? And so I made fun of him for it, and that was like the catalyst of us starting to do this podcast, and that's the Hawkman and tuna melt sandwich into a song. Full circle, everybody. Full circle. Yeah, but it was a very fun period of time to like do. I think we did like 50 episodes or something like that. They're out there.
Oh, nice.
We're gonna release them again. They were on a site and then they got taken down because we stopped paying for it or whatever. But they exist. A lot of you guys know you're in this production game. Like you start off and you are fucking terrible at it for 20 episodes, and then you start to get better. You start to let other people speak. You're not talking over one another. So it's a cool thing, and I would love to do it again if he's up for it. Who knows? We might have to have another Subway meeting where we discuss the future of Gordy Tells Justin Comics.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Sure. You want to do plugs then and just wrap it up?
Where can people find your work?
JustinBergo.com. I own that. My Instagram is Justin, just search Justin Bergo on Instagram or Cain Eats Abe, CAINEATSABE. I don't know why. Literally, I came up with that as like my Hotmail address in like 96. And then I was just like, I'm going to stick with this forever. Ugh. And so, yeah, Instagram, Justin Bergo, Twitter at Justin Bergo, and justinbergo.com.
Awesome.
Yeah. If you want frames made locally, probably Facebook. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Yeah. Cool. For the frame stuff, it's like, I want to be better than the big box stores and just a little bit cheaper. All my stuff is handcrafted. It's all wood based. It's, somebody out there that has my frames. I think they'd all say that they're...
Sounds like a threat.
Yeah, somebody. Somebody. I like that it sounds like a threat. That's what I want as a business
There's
owner. I want
some frames of mine in houses around here.
I'm in your house. I'm just around the corner. Awesome. Yeah. So thanks guys. Thanks for
thank you for being on the show. We
Absolutely.
enjoyed having you.
Yeah, thank you.